Hey everyone, welcome to the Week 16 weekly previews and matchups here with Jim Coventry on the RotoWire YouTube channel. And hopefully everyone watching has made to the semifinals, or if you're somehow still in the first round of the playoffs, leave that league next year, but in a successful spot. Jim's dunked on me in a few leagues because of Josh Allen, so I've singularly lost all but 3 of mine because I faced Josh Allen or some sort in those ones. And, hopefully it won't happen again, but Josh Allen looks to be poised for another fantastic end of the season stretch. And we'll get to all these games here to kick things off in the Week 16 slate. And reminder, there's going to be funky scheduling, not just this week, but next week as well, too. 1 game Thursday, 2 games Saturday, and then we have a Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday slate of games. I think next week, maybe there's not the Friday game, but it's going to be tough. So stay on your toes. Check your fantasy lineups if you've gotten to that point still, and be aware of what's going on. So we'll get to the Broncos-Chargers game here first. Chargers favored by 2.5 points. This one's in LA. Of course, there's the Justin Herbert weekly I injured my ankle of some sort thing that we're dealing with. The assumption is he's going to play because he's gotten through everything else. But the stretch where Herbert looked like a top 5 quarterback, I don't think is coincidental. Coincided when he was the healthiest this year, and also coincided with J.K. Dobbins being healthy. He's been an injured reserve. The rushing attack has been non-existent, and therefore the lack of weapons the Chargers had entering this year seems to be very, very prominent outside Ladd McConkey. We'll have to see the stats of Will Dissly. Last week, it seemed like he was a week-to-week basis. Certainly didn't play. Stone Smart's had 2 good fantasy games now, and it's possible Hayden Hurst could get activated up into reserve, although we still haven't heard much about that. So Stone Smart still might be a streaming tight end this week. I think the Broncos kind of just cruise in this one, and yet the Chargers are favored by 2.5. Am I looking at this wrong? What am I missing from the Charger side of things?
All year, the sports books have been on the Chargers. That's been plain and simple. And a lot of times they've been right, but they've been wrong plenty as well. I really believe the Chargers have gotten at least a 2-point edge in the spread in most games. You hit the nail on the head with the J.K. Dobbins thing. These teams met in week 6, and the Chargers won at Denver 23-16. Dobbins goes 25 carries for 96 yards. That was crucial, and it opened up their passing game as well. I know Quentin Johnson got in the end zone once or twice in that one, if I remember correctly. Once, I think it would have been. But anyway, that said, this is a completely different team. They can't run the ball. Gus Edwards and Kamani Vidal, they do not sustain a rushing attack. And Denver's good against the run. So now Herbert's going to have to win through the air. Patrick Surtain's ankle checked out fine. He had that ankle sprain. They called him a full practice on Monday, which I know was an estimation. But I don't even think he'll be on the injury report for this one. So that said, they will travel him. And if he's on Ladd McConkey, who's also playing limited, well, I shouldn't say also, because Surtain might not be, mismatch. And that's in Surtain's favor. And if that's the way it goes, Justin Herbert on an injured ankle, he's been having a hard time moving, I think. And, man, Denver's going to bring the heat. Especially with no rushing attack, they're going to bring the heat. This is going to be a long day, I think, for the Los Angeles offense, Joe.
Bo Nix had a pretty bad game for his standards, and I think it's fair to acknowledge that no one really expected Bo Nix at this point of the year to be at a point where you're like, man, that was a bad game. Obviously throwing a couple interceptions. The Colts gave that game away as opposed to Bo Nix and the Broncos winning that one last week. Is this going to be a turnaround, or is it a spot where if you were still streaming Bo Nix or playing him, it's like one of those, man, if I could go to anybody else outside of your normal streaming quarterbacks, you'd rather do that this week?
I don't see the Broncos scoring a lot of points here. The Chargers have a very good defense. They obviously got ripped up by the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers are playing at a really high level. Mm-hmm. Don't discount what they're doing. Ultimately, Courtland Sutton will get a little bit done here. That'll help. The rushing attack's not good. We have McLaughlin took on a little more of a role last week. He's got an injured quad, so he'll be less than 100% if he goes. I think they'll have some good field position. They'll kick some field goals. I think that the Broncos might score 1 touchdown and a bunch of field goals, and that might be about it. So Bo Nix might run for a little yardage, but I certainly wouldn't be looking at him as an upside option. It would be a 2-quarterback league floor option, and that'd be about it.
I'm with you on that over-under at 42. Let's just say I'm taking the under in that Thursday matchup. Let's move over to the Texans-Chiefs game, one of the 2 Saturday night contests, or I guess Saturday day contests here. A lot of intrigue just 24 hours ago because there was the idea that Patrick Mahomes wouldn't play, and then he was a full participant in the practice estimate for the Chiefs. And what was going to be, oh man, week-to-week ankle, they took x-rays. That didn't look very good. He got crunched by the Browns guys. This is a bad spot. The Chiefs could lose the number 1 seed. Oh, he's just fine. I'm going to call Fooey on that, Jim. There is absolutely no way. And You're an athlete. I'm an athlete. We've done athletic things in our lives. We have definitely rolled our ankles. There are levels to it, of course. And the high ankle sprain is the dreaded one because it's a month-long thing. And if you have a high ankle sprain, you have a high ankle sprain. It's just not going to be fine. I don't know if Patrick Mahomes is just going to be fine, despite what the practice report says for the Chiefs. And if he's immobile in any way, we know this Texans defensive line was at least built and attempted to be a pass rushing force and collapsing the pocket. I would be a little bit worried, just assuming Patrick Mahomes will be completely fine. And if the Chiefs are smart about this, given where they sit in the AFC, it might be one of those where we're intentionally protecting Mahomes by just running the ball, keeping things within the pocket, kind of being deliberately almost preseason level offense. That's not a stretch to say that the Chiefs could be actually the lower scoring of the two teams here come Saturday.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, look, I'm never betting against Patrick Mahomes. I remember the game in the playoffs a couple of years ago against Cincinnati. It was his plant foot he had the high ankle sprain on.
Yep.
And he was facing Lou Anarumo, who was really cooking up great defenses that time. Like, he had Mahomes' number in prior games, and then he gets a limited Mahomes. And I was so in on Mahomes under his passing yardage. He blew over it without any problem. So in terms of me predicting Patrick Mahomes, Santa Claus, Tooth Fairy, all that stuff, I've got nothing. But what I'll say is what I agree with you on, they will run the ball. Having Mahomes on the field will keep the defense honest. I think it's a regular season game. They certainly are playing to win for the number one seed. As you mentioned, the Texans are a very good defense. But I think, again, you load the tight ends up. You got Pacheco. You're going to run him here. You'll probably get Kareem Hunt involved too. And you will just try to win a low-scoring game because defensively, C.J. Stroud, it's just not going on this year. And Tank Dell's not going on. Joe Mixon, the offensive line blocking has been horrible. He's had some good fantasy performances. So you're still playing him there. He had 5 catches last week that got him to 10 PPR points. But obviously, Steve Spagnuolo probably comes up with a game plan to limit Nico Collins a bit. Again, you're starting Collins. But I think ultimately the Chiefs grind out a really low-scoring victory here.
Are you starting Tank Dell at all? I mean, let's just say he's now very clearly in wide receiver 3 or low end flex territory. Is that even too high of an assessment given the Chiefs defense and what probably be a low scoring game on both sides?
Yeah, Tank Dell has done very, very little. I think he had like maybe one good game. He just is not getting anything going at all. You're hoping for 35 yards. You're hoping for that. So it's a desperation flex that he gets a long play, but he hasn't been getting those. Teams are playing too high against them. He's, as Mario says, he's overexposed as like a starting outside receiver right now. And I couldn't word that any better. I would have very little confidence starting Tank Dell unless you have no other options.
I don't always like doing this, but given where we're both kind of aligned, if you were to tease the over of the Broncos-Chargers game again at 42 right now, and the over on the Chiefs-Texans 41.5, put a 10-point tease in there, 7-point tease, we're talking about nearly 50 points, and I would be very surprised if either of these teams combined for something like 45 or 46. I think you're in that comfort range. If you're doing a teaser option on the unders and you're teasing it up a little bit higher, that kind of feels like it's a safer call for that.
Yeah, I like that.
Let's go to the Steelers and Ravens, the far more interesting of the Saturday games, at least in my mind. It's not a knock on the Chiefs and Texans. Like, it's a good matchup, but there's not going to be a lot of offense. Both these teams are going to be a little bit cagey, the Texans and Chiefs. Whereas the Steelers, Ravens, there's an AFC North divisional aspect. It's entirely possible that the Ravens could get back into the AFC North number 1 spot if they were to beat the Steelers here Saturday afternoon. And the Ravens offense has been super dynamic. If George Pickens does not play, and again, last week it was real touch and go week to week. I'm a little surprised in a short week if Pickens would play again. That offense looked completely different against the Eagles without a threat vertically with George Pickens, and that can't be replaced. So if Pickens doesn't play, this one's in Baltimore. I know the Baltimore pass defense hasn't been very good this season. It's gotten better over the past month or so against bad teams.
Yep.
I think the Ravens completely roll if Pickens is out.
100% agree on that. I have 2 different predictions for this game. One is if Pickens plays, and it's a big Ravens win, and then if Pickens plays, a little more narrow. But he makes that much of a difference because defensively, you have to account for him, and that means you got to put a safety over the top. You cannot let George Pickens beat you because we know Russell Wilson will throw downfield, so you can't allow that. If he's not in the field, you'll take your chance with Calvin Austin, and that's fine. for fantasy, Calvin Austin's a dart throw because he might get a big play, but it's not like the Ravens are going to sell out. If there's no Pickens, they're selling out to stop the run game, which they normally don't have to do, but they'll put extra emphasis because the Steelers will put an extra tight end out and they will try to dominate on the ground. And this is going to be where the Ravens are saying, no, you're not doing that to us today. So it'll get ugly if there's no Pickens.
You're overthinking things if you're benching Derrick Henry, right? I mean, we in the fantasy community will say just player studs. That's a catch-all for some experts, but I think it's overthinking things to bench Derrick Henry. If Pickens is out, is Freiermuth in that fringy like tight end 8 range, or given this matchup, are you concerned with Roquan Smith and the like that they would be able to lock down Freiermuth if Pickens doesn't play?
Yeah, Roquan's not running like he used to. He doesn't look like he does in the past. He's a slower version of himself, and this is like a bottom 10 unit against tight ends. And Freiermuth will occasionally, like up to 20% of the time, they'll line him up outside. They'll actually like weaponize him on occasion. He doesn't get a lot of targets, but lately that's been up. And we saw last week, we recommended to play him against the Eagles, even though the Eagles were tough on tight ends because Pickens was out and he came through at a touchdown. Again, not a lot of catches, but the production for fantasy has been there despite the lack of targets. And I think they will get behind. I think they'll have to throw more than they'd like. And honestly, with Pickens isn't playing, Freiermuth's like the only dependable receiver they have. I know Calvin Austin, again, is a boom bust play, but the only reliable one left is Freiermuth. Not like Van Jefferson is going to be an issue.
Right. In your rankings, I'm thinking like the Freiermuth, Cade Otton, Tucker Kraft range. Which one of them would you rather start again? Cade Otton, Freiermuth, or Tucker Kraft?
Yeah, it'd be Freiermuth. Cade Otton has kind of dried up since Mike Evans came back. And your third one again was
what, Tucker Kraft?
Yeah, Tucker
against
Kraft.
The Saints.
Yeah, they may not need him in that game. I think they may not need him. I think they may be able to run the ball and they might get enough lead. This might be one of those 17, 18 pass attempt games for Jordan Love, which we'll talk about that game later. Yeah. So I would put Freiermuth ahead of the pack.
All right, that's good. I actually have to make that decision, Freiermuth or Cade Otton in the NFFC. I'll go with Freiermuth. Right now, Cade Otton was in that lineup against the Cowboys. All right, Luis kicks it off in the chat here. He says, start Penix. That is all. Well, that's what the Falcons are choosing to do. It was reported late last night by Adam Schefter that Michael Penix will be your starting quarterback for the Falcons come the Giants matchup here to kick off the early afternoon slate Sunday. I mean, this is the interesting part of the Falcons side of things. The Falcons should win, and I win comfortably. Now, Nick Whalen and I were on live SiriusXM when that news was announced, and Nick had been following that line as is. The Falcons are favored by 10 before it was unconfirmed Kirk Cousins is going to be the quarterback, and then it's dropped down to 8.5 with Michael Penix as your starter. If the Falcons are choosing to play Michael Penix over Kirk Cousins, they believe Michael Penix is a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins right now. Then why is the line shifted almost 2 points down? I don't understand that at all, because better quarterback play will make this offense significantly better. And they're playing a team that just got obliterated by the Ravens a week before.
I think that point spread changed not because of Penix. It changed because the line was too high. The Falcons should be favored by 10 points to nobody. If they were playing a college team, I wouldn't favor them by 10 points. I mean, they're a decent team, but they're not beating anybody by 10 points. And I think as soon as the bettors, the sharps saw 10, oh yeah, they hopped on that all day long. A 1.5 line movement. I think that's what it was. Because realistically, if they were doing it based on the quarterback, it might be a different line movement than that. I think it was betting. That's honestly what I think it is, Joe.
Okay, and I think that's a great call. The Giants side of things, you're playing Malik Neighbors and effectively nobody else. Like maybe in deeper formats, you can consider Wan'Dale Robinson. So I don't know if it's, well, and Tyrone Tracy too. I suppose it's Malik and Tyrone Tracy. The Falcons side has a lot of question marks now. So Kirk Cousins was throwing a ton to Ray-Ray McCloud. Does that just immediately get removed because there's better quarterback play or better decision-making process or frankly, worse decision-making? Like Michael Penix might want to extend plays, make a bigger play, doesn't want to check down to Ray-Ray McCloud. I think the answer probably is yes. And then in that instance, does Darnell Mooney or Drake London get the bump, or is it somebody else? Like if the offense were to get quote-unquote better with Michael Penix, again, that's what the Falcons are choosing to do, who benefits from the offense getting better?
All right. So first of all, my assumption is, why is Penix in? The answer is Kirk Cousins can't move. And that's all it is. Because what teams did was they realized he can't move. So the game plan for every team they played was send extra people. Just send people at him because he can't react. The Raiders, they lost Malcolm Kuntz in the preseason. He was their second best pass rusher. They lost Max Crosby. I assumed in this game the Raiders would get absolutely no pass rush. They just sent extra bodies. And that was like the final straw. It was like a team that can't pressured us. and the whole offense is discombobulated. And you notice they went with a super run-heavy approach, and they were lucky they held on to win that game. But basically, they just held on for dear life with Bijan running the ball. Well, Michael Penix will give them this. They'll have play action, which they couldn't do with Kirk because he actually could not make the move from under center to get to the physical. It's a little bit of athleticism involved in play action. Doesn't look like it, but there is. He didn't have that. Occasionally, they could schedule some rollout plays too. So I think this just gives defenses a pause. Defenses can't come in and just blitz them without reckless abandon because this team has weapons. And if the play gets extended at all, Drake London and Mooney can crush you. Who are the beneficiaries? First of all, I do think they still go run heavy. I think in Penix's first game, I don't think this is air it out 30 times. This is not what they want to do. This is a game they should easily win. The Giants have no Dexter Lawrence. It's a big deal. So ultimately, I think when we get into this game, it's going to be Bijan running 18 to 20 times. I think that Drake London sees the majority of targets. Big target. They put him in the slot 41% of the time. I think a lot's going to be schemed his way. If they have success, when we get to week 17, we might see that offense open up a little bit more. I don't think they need to here.
We don't normally do start sits on this one, but I think it's a fair from a tier perspective. Luis in the chat asks, would you play Michael Penix or Russell Wilson with the assumption that George Pickens is not out there against the Ravens? That's a really tough call in my mind.
Well, I would play Penix in that idea because I don't think Russell Wilson throws for 130 yards and he can't run anymore. It's not like he's running against the Ravens. So basically, Russell Wilson might get you 6 fantasy points. I think by accident, if it's a screen to Bijan, if it's a short slant to Drake London, all 3 corners for the Giants were out last week. So it wouldn't take much for somebody to catch a hitch and run 80 yards with it. I'd play Penix for that reason.
If George Pickens is active against the Ravens, does that change the equation at all for you?
It does. It does. I would be more inclined in that case because I think the Ravens are going to score some points in this one.
So
and if they do, they're going to have to keep up. If there's a George Pickens out there, I do think the Steelers get enough done through the air that I would go at Russ.
I'm right there with you. I almost would kind of want to consider like a Cooper Rush in that scenario too. Not that I think Michael Penix will be bad per se, but against that Buccaneers offense, again, it's a similar thing where the Cowboys have to keep pace. They're still effectively fighting for the playoffs. It's not like you're going to throw Trey Lance out there at any point, but there is so much more risk in saying, oh, Cooper Rush, if he can't get 200 plus yards, what does that look like? Whereas I think Michael Penix will get some rushing opportunity too. So I'm with you. I'm playing Michael Penix in the event that George Pickens is not available for that Steelers offense in the case of Russell Wilson. All right, let's go over to the next game here on the Week 16 slate. That's the Cardinals and Panthers. And again, we talked about Jonathan Brooks done for the season last week, so it's the Chupa Hubbard show. The Panthers favored for the first time in 34 games and then lose to the Cowboys, and it was a fall from grace for Bryce Young. Micah Parsons was just a terror against that Panthers offensive line. And now you look at the Cardinals, I don't think they pose nearly as much of a threat pass rushing wise. And this isn't like Kirk Cousins where he's immobile. Bryce Young is able to move around the pocket. He's got some ability, some wiggle. You don't want him looking down, though, right? That's always the big issue, and it's not just because he's 5'9". You don't want him looking down at the. I want to make you laugh there. You don't want to look down at the offensive line and try to figure out where you're still trying to keep your head up and making the play. And it felt like Bryce Young was falling back to that tendency against the Cowboys. Did the Cowboys unlock something, or is that just Micah Parsons being the best person in the field and exacting his will?
Yeah, Micah Parsons definitely changes the face of a football game. He's a one-man wrecking crew. He's one of the, obviously, and you don't need me to tell you this, but he is one of the few massive disruptors in the NFL. He plays a good career, Hall of Fame, no problem. We'll see how that goes. But when we speak to this game, Arizona, when you look at numbers, you say, oh, they don't get pressure. But it's sneaky. Jonathan Gannon has this team running simulated pressure. It's kind of like the Vikings. Not to that level, but the Vikings, they don't always get home. But what it does is it speeds up the passing attack. And that's what you don't want Bryce Young to do. You don't want him speeding up. The Cardinals are very good at getting quarterbacks to speed up their game. And so the Cardinals are going to be able to do that. And they're very good at it. And they're pretty good against the run as well. So this is not a good matchup. And the one thing with the Cardinals, they're not an elite team. We know that. They couldn't beat Seattle twice. They couldn't beat the Vikings, of course. But then when they play like teams like New England, they sailed. They won easily because this is a good football team. And so in this game, their defense will slow down the Panthers enough. They, like I said, they play way better than the sum of their parts. They're not very talented, but they play cohesive football. Offensively, another James Conner game. We called it last week. We're calling it again. They're going to lean on James Conner, put an extra tight end on the field. Carolina isn't very good at stopping the run. If they put extra bodies, they risk Kyler Murray breaking contain, which could be a problem. James Conner goes off, and I really think the Cardinals just kind of steamroll. Adam Thielen will get it done for fantasy. Chuba Hubbard will be a floor play again.
I played Adam Thielen over Jalen Waddle last week. It was one of the two Waddle decisions I had to make. That one ended up working out. Now only 10 points for Thielen, but Waddle got injured. Let's just say it's Adam Thielen over like Jawan Jennings, and the Niners are facing the Dolphins this week in Miami. There shouldn't be weather stuff, right? So like, what level of tier of streaming level receiver is Adam Thielen this week? And Thielen or Jawan Jennings?
That's a good question because, see, the thing with Jawan Jennings is Jalen Ramsey doesn't exclusively play outside. He'll play in the slot some, but I have a feeling in this game because Debo can't run anymore. They kind of know that. I wouldn't be surprised if Jalen Ramsey spent more time than not on Jawan Jennings. And because of that, I would go to Adam Thielen. He's getting targets. They're going to trail. Thielen gets open. And like as tricky as sneaky as the Cardinals defense is, Thielen should continue to get open.
I like that call. That's a really good point. And if Ramsey is on Jawan Jennings, Ramsey isn't the all-pro corner that he used to be, but that doesn't mean he's like a complete nobody either. We're not that point in his career. Let's go to the NFC North here with the Lions traveling to Chicago, the last outdoor game theoretically that Jared Goff will play all season. I say theoretically because the Lions are on the outs right now. The vibes are very bad, not because Dan Campbell or anything else, but because they can't get away from season-ending injuries. Interesting, Jim, that all this stuff keeps happening on Ford Field. I wonder why there are so many season-long injuries that occur on a really crappy turf. Who knows? We'll never fix it, though, and nobody will ever be upset about either way in the NFL. David Montgomery, the biggest one from a fantasy perspective, done for the season, but they lost 3 of the defensive starters as well, too. It's a tough spot to be. All that being said, it's still the Bears, and it's still the Lions. I have to think Detroit wins this, although the Thanksgiving game from a couple of weeks ago, in the back of my mind, is there any way that the slide continues for Detroit and they suffer a loss to Chicago this week?
Remember that Detroit-Chicago game, the first half, it was full blowout mode by the Lions. The Lions relaxed at halftime. It was a typical garbage time game. And the Lions, they lost their mojo. The Bears came roaring back. It was one of those games. In this game, look, I think the Lions have to come out and make a very simple statement. They're like, we know this defense is decimated beyond repair. So from now on, it's 37 plus points a game. That's what it is. This is the world they live in now. Because when they get to the playoffs, they can't stop anybody. They've lost too many people. So they'll continue to blitz, and that's going to hurt the Bears. That's going to be a big problem for the Bears because Caleb Williams we see the issues when the pressure's coming, and they're going to send pressure. And even though they don't have corners, lost Jamel Dean last week, the Bears are going to be disjointed on offense. They're not going to do well here. The Lions, on the other hand, they will score at will against the Bears. The Bears, since Eberflus was fired, have become really like a bottom 5 defense. Bad against the run, give up chunk plays. Gibbs will crush them. They just have the secondary receivers. Jamison Williams probably has a big game here when they move St. Brown to the slot. Wheels up. The Lions are only 6.5-point favorites. The injury hype, that's more NFL playoffs related. That's not this week related. You're getting a discount on the line. They should be 9-point favorites.
Interesting. I kind of feel like there's backdoor cover potential. I don't think the Lions lose. They got to be fine money line wise, but this is in Chicago. We know that Jared Goff condition wise struggles with that stuff. The last time the Lions played outdoors was that Packers game, and it was because Jordan Love gifted a pick 6 to Kirby Joseph. It really wasn't anything to do with Jared Goff. I don't think he made a pass more than 5 yards down the field. I don't know if there will be that condition other than cold in Chicago come this weekend. I'm going to go the other way with this, and I very rarely disagree with you because you're right on basically everything, Jim. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears do get at least a backdoor cover on the 6.5-point spread. I would be shocked if they win, although it'll be very, very fun as the Packers.
And I like that, Joe. I like that. But had that not happened, the backdoor cover just like 3 weeks ago. See, that's the thing. The Lions, and
that's
I agree
the motivation factor.
I think they already know that this happened. They saw the script play out. But I agree with you. That definitely could happen. They definitely could do back to cover. I just think the Lions are putting up 37. I think they're putting up 37, and that means the Bears have to score 32. in my math, I don't see him scoring more than 23. But
I don't know
again,
if
I like your idea.
tiny hands can handle 37 points in the itty bitty
Jameer
cold.
Gibbs. I think Jameer Gibbs is going to put up like 180 scrimmage yards. Remember when he played the Bears? It was like 9 carries for like 85 yards. He was just gashing them. And the Bears, see, that's the thing with the Bears defense. They give up explosive plays on the ground. That offensive line, Gibbs is going to have a day here.
You're probably right. I wouldn't necessarily want to spend all my bullets trying to beat the 4-10 Bears or whatever it is with Jameer Gibbs. Like, let's just save him more for the post. I actually think Craig Reynolds is totally fine in deeper leagues for that exact reason. And if the scenario occurs where the Lions do blow out the Bears, it's Craig Reynolds getting all that the third and fourth quarter work, and that might be enough against this Bears defense to be able to generate some flex territory in deeper formats. Let's go to the Browns Bengals one AFC North game. This one also had some headline changing news and would have been. It's a complete net negative from a fantasy perspective because Jameis Winston now has been replaced, rightfully so. Like, from a real life football perspective, Jameis Winston was making too many throws that I make in Madden. Oh, I called a post play. I have to throw the post no matter what. Crap, 2 safeties picked. That's not good. Repeat. You replace him for Dorian Thompson-Robinson, second-year quarterback. There's some draft capital part of this too. To be clear to folks, all these second-year quarterbacks that came over the past 3 years are teams just trying to repeat the Brock Purdy thing, trying to catch lightning in a bottle. Well, none of them have Kyle Shanahan that are doing this. I'm very convinced that this is not going to make a difference and that the Browns will still stink offensively, to the point where Jerry Jeudy, and we talked about this on the Sirius XM show yesterday, was an automatic start, and I don't know if you can trust him in your lineup this week. That's how far, even against this Bengals defense, that the Browns offense could fall with DTR as QB.
Dorian Thompson-Robinson, in his brief 12 games and 150-ish pass attempts, his average depth of pass is about 3.5 yards, and yet his completion rate is less than 50.
How is that possible?
It's not. He is not an NFL quarterback. He should not be on the field. He might be able to start today for a good college team, maybe. Might be able to do that. This Jerry Jeudy is done. Jerry Jeudy was like a top 15 receiver, maybe even better than that. I have him at 41 right now, and that's generous. Elijah Moore, goodbye. You're done.
Cedric Tillman, I had hopes of him. Like, you could just drop him at this point. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, because Cedric Tillman lives on the downfield ball, right? I don't see him throwing that. So, yeah, we got a big problem there. Look, Jerome Ford, you're going to get volume. You might get a few screen passes. But Cincinnati,
let's expand on that, because there's a few listeners in the chat that were asking about Jerome Ford. He was my top waiver wire pickup this week at around 70% available in different rosters. I think if you think the Bengals are going to just massacre the Browns, or if it's going to be like a 21-point game at halftime, which is certainly possible that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase have been playing, even a guy that's throwing as poorly and as ineffective as Dorian Thompson-Robinson is likely going to be against the Browns. I think it's fair to say. There are check down opportunities. In a full point PPR league, Ford might get 7 catches for 20 yards, but it doesn't matter. That's 9 points in addition to whatever rushing opportunities. So where is Ford, at least in your rankings, with the assumption that there's a lot of check downs, a lot of screens, and Ford is the most capable back to do that on that roster right now?
Yeah, I fully expect the Bengals will have zero respect for Thompson-Robinson. I fully expect to put 8 or 9 bodies up near the box. I expect there'll be, even though the Bengals don't have a good run defense, you put that many bodies there, it doesn't matter anymore. The blocking from the Browns standpoint has been horrible, run and pass. So look, Ford, like you said, he might catch a number of short passes. You're banking on those in a PPR only league. In a standard league, you're hoping to get 35 yards. Remember last week, that long touchdown run, the game was out of hand. The Chiefs were playing the pass. It was like a draw play, and they didn't have any inclination the run was coming. And
you saw Jerome Ford, the kick returner. I mean, that's really what it was. He hit the same bounce right, and then was the 40-yard dash. I agree with you.
Weird play.
Najee Harris against the Ravens or Jerome Ford against the Bengals?
I'll go with Najee Harris, because Najee Harris, like I said, last week was tough, but he will get enough volume, and he has a better chance of scoring a touchdown. He has a better chance of getting yardage with the catches he gets, because he does get targeted. So I would go Najee Harris fairly easily. I have Jerome Ford round running back 28.
Okay, and that's borderline starting territory. Like, that's not horrible from a waiver wire perspective. And you think about the other guys available, Craig Reynolds, we talked about on the waiver wire show, and then also Kendrick Miller. We'll get to that the Saints and Packers game Monday night. That makes things complicated again with games Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. It's such bad roster decisions to have to make at this point. But I'm with you in the Jerome Ford. I think 28, 25 in that range is about probably where I'm at, eyeballing as well too. Bengals, you're playing all those guys. I think it's fine to move on to this next contest. Titans, Colts. I'm going to be honest with you, Jim. Of the non-Packer players, Jonathan Taylor is probably one of my favorites of all time. Of course, I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin. He's from UW-Madison. There's a lot of that stuff going on. There was also the I was right, and really I was just copying Mario Puig, who was actually right about all this stuff, the prospect stuff. Everyone was talking about Jonathan Taylor. He's not that fast, whatever. He was fantastic in his first couple of years, but he burned me, Jim. He hurt me real deep because I was expecting a fantastic performance from Jonathan Taylor over the past month or so, and he killed me, literally lost me 2 leagues by throwing the ball 1 yard short of the end zone when nobody was near tackling him. I can't handle that one. That one's going to be really tough for me. I lost literally 2 leagues by 6 points because Jonathan Taylor couldn't hold by 6 points because he couldn't hold the ball any 1 yard longer past the end zone. So when I say, will Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor do well this week? Understand that I'm already a little bit peeved off because I could have had opportunities to keep going in my fantasy playoffs. And Jonathan Taylor said, no, I need to be cool and drop the ball right before the end zone, I guess.
Jonathan Taylor has a 31st percentile broken tackle rate. Horrible for him. 16th percentile yards after contact. However, he has played well for fantasy the last 2 weeks. And I know the touchdown last week. I get what you just said, the fumble. That was an 8. If you lose 2 points for a fumble, it's an 8.1 point swing. 6 for the touchdown, 2 for the fumble, 0.1 for the 1 extra yard that they took away from him for not crossing the goal line. So, yeah, that was a big hit. But Denver was not an easy defense to run against. And they were down 3 linemen in that game. And they might get Ryan Kelly back this week. But regardless, Tennessee's tougher against the run. That's a very, very stout run defense. And they're probably going to play the run specifically here. I still think Taylor's a volume play here. I think he still gets you 75-ish yards, 40% chance of scoring a touchdown in this one and actually holding the ball this time. So I would still play him. But again, he's more like that running back 2 because the fantasy did just haven't been there. He hasn't had a game over 17 PPR points since week 8.
That's tough. How about Anthony Richardson from like the quarterback, like 8 through 12 perspective? I mean, the Titans are good against the run, not as great against the pass. There's always the possibility that Mason Rudolph or Will Levis will bumble things up and give good field position. And Anthony Richardson can make an explosive run and get you 13 fantasy points while having a really bad fantasy or having a bad quarterback day like he did against the Broncos. This is a better spot for this passing attack than it was against Denver because there aren't many worse spots than Denver from a passing perspective. Is Anthony Richardson in quarterback 2-ish streaming territory in super flex leagues or whatever else?
I mean, Anthony Richardson has at least 20 fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. The game he missed, he had 14.7. Not catastrophic. It wasn't what you wanted. But overall, yeah, he's done enough for fantasy. And Tennessee, again, it's a moderate matchup. They're not going to pass much. It's a low-scoring game. So you hope Richardson runs. You hope he runs 1 in the end zone, and that's your way of getting there. Because he's certainly not getting there in the passing game. That's not going to happen. Josh Downs, I love him every week, but Titans have been really good against slot receivers. I'm still playing Downs. I'm still playing him this week, but I'm a little bit concerned about that matchup. But like I said, quarterback 2 for Richardson, fine, but he's going to have to rush in a touchdown because he is not getting it done through the air.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm playing Anthony Richardson over. I mean, I guess it's not a choice now, but I was playing over Jameis Winston at certain instances. I guess Geno Smith or Anthony Richardson. That's the other spot where I have to decide. Geno against the Vikings. There could be rain in this forecast as well too in Seattle.
Look, I don't think Geno's playing. He couldn't finish that game. He wanted to get back in. If he couldn't get back in, the swelling doesn't hit till after the game usually. It's usually the next day the swelling hits. My guess is it's Sam Howell, so that decision's made.
Yeah,
in a limited Geno, I know we'll talk about the game later. The Packers are going to say, not the Packers,
the Vikings, yeah.
The Vikings are going to be sending people at him. That's a problem. Geno's if he plays.
Brian Flores will be frothing at the mouth for that matchup. Yeah, we'll get to that one in just a little bit. Yeah. But Charlene in the chat and everyone else is frothing at their mouths to hear what you have to say about Cooper Kupp and this Rams offense against the Jets. I mean, you look at least on RotoWire, you look at Cooper Kupp or you look at Garrett Wilson or even Puka Nacua, and it's going to show number 1 defense against opposing receivers, at least as the Jets. So Cooper Kupp looks far more nerve-wracking given his good old goose egg 0 in the monsoon last Thursday. This is the play your studs thing, fantasy analyst, that I'm going to tell you. And I'll give you another question my friend asked a little bit earlier, but Cooper Kupp, at least him first. What's your thoughts with what's going to happen with the Rams offense this week?
Cooper Kupp's targets in the last 3 games are 3, 8, and 6. They were in that shootout against Buffalo, and he goes 5 for 92 and a touchdown. But against New Orleans, 3 for 17. He had the goose egg last week. Look, I wish I had a crystal ball here, but in 2 or 3 games, he has been like almost a nothing for fantasy. Puka Nacua is so far the number one in that offense. It's not even funny anymore. And I don't know how many points they're going to need to score here. Now, the Jets could come out in that second half mode like they did really 3 of the last 4 weeks. Second half, they've been nuts. They don't move the ball for a whole first 30 minutes, and then they get behind, and all of a sudden Aaron Rodgers goes insane, which can't explain that to anybody. Maybe that's how long it takes an Achilles to warm up on game day. Maybe that's it. But that said, look, Cooper Kupp is a boom bust option. He could get you 0. He can get you 3. He also could still get you 20 points because he does have 3 20-point PPR games in his last 5, but he has 2 games under 5. You don't know which version you're getting. There's nothing in the matchup that ever screams that this is going to happen to him. And so it's just a matter of how much they choose to use him. Kyron Williams could easily get going on the ground here.
Yeah, true.
And so, look, it's just a boom bust. When you're in your fantasy matchup, you look at it this way. If you could risk a 2 or a 3 for the 20, then you do it. If you're looking at your lineup and you just need like a 10, 12-point game and you got another player who could do it, then start that player. But most people in their fantasy lives, you don't have somebody that you probably could put in over Cooper Kupp. Just go in with diminished expectations and hope for the best.
Well, okay. Well, how about this? Like Jalen McMillan for the Buccaneers against the Cowboys. Would you play McMillan over Cooper Kupp?
In theory, it sounds nice. You had 2 big games. Dallas is down corners.
Yeah. A lot of passing overall, you'd assume.
Yeah, in theory, it sounds good. But 2 games of Jalen McMillan doing well, it's almost like, is he still a boom bust guy? Did he just have 2 weeks? I probably would play Kupp over him just because if you lose your fantasy, that's a good question because
this is what I'm at too. Yep.
Semi game, and it's because you had Jalen McMillan over Cooper Kupp, you kick yourself all off season. So in a situation like that, it's not somebody who you have had established for a while as a high floor play. It has to be an established player to play him over Kupp.
This is why we're friends, because we think the same way. I made this case on a few of the national radio hits that I do last week. It was like, do I play X player over DK Metcalf? And I said, I understand why. Like, don't play DK Metcalf. I completely get it. He's been really bad. Now Jair didn't play for the Packers, and obviously Metcalf didn't have a great game. But Joe Bartel, the person, not the Joe Bartel, the fantasy analyst, is going to get pissed at himself if I played like Jalen McMillan over DK Metcalf and McMillan only gets 6 points and Metcalf gets 24. I will get far more pissed at myself in that event as opposed to Metcalf gets 7, Cooper Kupp gets 7, and McMillan gets 17. That one, like I live with myself more. This is you ask yourself, you, the listener, you, the user, the ones making these decisions, what are you more comfortable with? Are you fine with kind of rolling the dice and, oh man, I'm going to go for the big swing. If I lose it, that's okay. I was making a big play. If your personality says you can handle that, great. Yeah. I think that's totally fine. Playing McMillan makes complete sense. I have a friend that's asking, do I play Jalen McMillan or Garrett Wilson? Kind of leaning Jalen McMillan. I'm not answering him right now because I know I would say Garrett Wilson because Joe Bartel, not Joe Bartel the fantasy, as Joe Bartel the person, would need to have Garrett Wilson in there in the event that he ends up going off in that spot. So I think it's totally fine. We've seen a lot of the questions. Again, obviously, you're going to do the Sunday start sit stuff. A lot of these games happening earlier, which is why we're doing a bit more of these questions now. But you'll have the start sit at 11 a.m. Eastern time on this RotoWire YouTube channel. We're going to go through that stuff. I personally, Joe Bartel the person, can't have that stud or that Cooper Kupp, the guy that's been doing this for a number of years, a number of weeks for my team, suddenly get benched because Jalen McMillan scored 3 touchdowns in the past 2 weeks. It's not Nick Westbrook-Akine and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but it's a little bit like that, and I just can't rationalize. So I'm completely with you on that, and I understand. It sounds like Jim Coventry, the person, Joe Bartel, the person, have to play their studs at least in the playoff semifinals. So Charlene asks JSN over Cooper Kupp. That's probably another one that's at least a little bit fair. Again, Seahawks in a weather issue and possibly no Geno Smith too.
If Howell plays at quarterback, you got to play Cooper Kupp. If Geno Smith plays, even on the limited knee, they have they're working the ball to Smith-Njigba short so often, he's going to get a lot of catches here. They figured out how to unlock him in the last 7 or 8 weeks. So I would play, again, if it's Geno Smith, I'd play Smith-Njigba. If it's Sam Howell, I would play Cooper Kupp. We probably got to go like rapid fire through these last games.
I apologize. And so we'll go to the Eagles Commanders. This is another one that was in the chat. Terry McLaurin was completely locked down last time the Eagles and Commanders played. We've mentioned before, when the Commanders play actual real teams that know how to play football, they often struggle offensively, the Eagles being one of the better ones. This one's in Washington, though. Terry McLaurin specifically, he's not going to get his massive outing. Like he probably should have had like 50 points last week due to some drops and overthrows. Right. That's not happening this week against the Eagles. But is Terry McLaurin a guy that you're comfortably playing this week, or are you a little bit concerned?
Week 11, Terry McLaurin had 1 catch, 10 yards, and it was a game the Eagles were blowing them out. There was an 8-point play at the end of the game, a touchdown, a 2-point conversion that made that game 26-18 as the final. It wasn't even that close. It was a blowout. And Vic Fangio's defenses, they will always limit explosive plays. Those corners are outstanding. Jaden Daniels took 8 sacks last week. Philly brings pressure. In that first meeting, it was 89 yards to Austin Eckler on screen passes. He's done for the year. It was a bunch of short passes to Zach Ertz. Probably not playing with a concussion. They already elevated somebody, another tight end. Those are the only guys that had it going because the Eagles just took away everything else. Well, they just played them. And it's not like Cliff Kingsbury has an antidote. Not going to happen. Again, the same rule with Cooper Kupp applies to Terry McLaurin. If you rode him, you play him, you understand, but that 1 for 10 is firmly in play here because the Eagles realize if you take him away, what else do they have? Most teams have never been able to do that. They're like, okay, whatever. No, it's Terry McLaurin. You need to stop him. And the Eagles are fully equipped, and their defensive scheme is perfectly equipped to keep him from big plays.
My best ball teams are super excited for Ben Sinnott finally getting to start at tight end for the Commanders. Too bad they have all been ruled out way before this point matters. Let's go over to the Vikings Seahawks again real quick. Both Kenneth Walker and Geno Smith, their status is up in the air. It's a late afternoon game. Kenneth Walker was doubtful as of last week. Of course, he was doubtful the week before too. I don't know what to make of that, but if Geno Smith is out and Sam Howell's the quarterback, do you play Zach Charbonnet over like a Najee Harris, for example?
Yeah, assuming Kenneth Walker doesn't play.
Correct.
Look, he's going to get volume, but Najee's going to get volume too. I'd give Najee the edge because defenses will play it so much differently. The Vikings are lights out against the run. Not a good matchup to be playing for Zach Charbonnet. And Ken Walker, again, I'm not in the house. I'm not a doctor. I'd be stunned if he played. A calf injury, you have missed 2 games. That means it's a significant calf injury. Calf injuries last a long time. Now, again, I'm not in the house. I'm not a doctor. I'll repeat that. But I was stunned they didn't put him on IR. I mean, I remember when Joe Burrow, a quarterback, had a calf injury. And again, every calf injury could be different. I get all that. But you already missed 2 games. That tells me something.
That's true. No, Geno, does DK Metcalf fall out of the flex territory altogether?
Oh, absolutely. Because Sam Howell never met a sack he couldn't take. He would break the sack record if he was given an opportunity to start again. And there's no way with the way that the Vikings send people that he's going to launch something downfield and actually, A, have it be on target, and B, even have the ability to have time to get the ball down there. No, DK Metcalf almost cannot be started with Sam Howell.
I normally am pretty good with your comments. We do a good job of throwing one-liners at each other, but you got me on that one. I was going to get into a coughing fit as I'm a little bit under the weather.
I even remember what I said. I'd be dangerous. What line did I say? Do you know? I don't even know what I said.
No. Well, you said Sam Howell never met a sack he couldn't take.
Yes.
I think you could
take that any way you wish.
I'm a pretty good barometer for a lot of these things. You could use that everywhere, and that's going to kill, I think, for every single person. So let's go over the Patriots-Bills game. I think realistically, you're playing everybody from the Bills side, like Josh Allen, James Cook. Now, the Ty Johnson stuff is interesting. Didn't that feel very deliberately schemed for just the Lions?
Yeah. So here's what happened in that game. And I didn't predict this, and I don't think anybody would have predicted it. How do you attack the Lions? This is the Bills last week. Well, of course, they don't have linebackers who can cover. So you get people in the middle of the field and you expose that. They chose to make that weapon, not Dalton Kincaid, not Khalil Shakir. They chose to particularly weaponize Ty Johnson out of the backfield, get him over the line into the linebackers who can't cover, and they use him on a number of routes. It was very well planned. That's not repeatable. That was a game-specific plan. Notice Amari Cooper didn't get a single target. They did not waste their time. They threw 2 targets to Keon Coleman. They did not waste their time throwing on the outside. Everything was designed to beat the weakness of the Lions.
Boy, you wish all teams would just do that. I feel like it's so
Yes.
annoying that why the best
Yes.
teams are the only ones that seem to do it. But you're completely right. It was a lot of those wheel routes. I think that was one of those. Oh wow, we can all do it. Like, would you be surprised if DeAndre Swift had a few of those packages called for him, or Travis Homer for the Bears this weekend? So, like, I think every team moving forward is going to have a few more of those wheel routes in there because that looked bad and it looked just constantly there. Why they didn't do it with James Cook and chose Ty Johnson instead, I thought was very interesting.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I don't really know. Are you playing Amari
Joe,
Cooper?
real quick, I had predicted Cook was going to do that. Now that I think back to last week, I predicted that would happen. Now he had one catch for 28 yards and he ran for a bunch and scored, so he was fine for fantasy. I thought because he's very good at those. I just didn't see a world where Ty Johnson on the first drive of the game was put in and used in that way. But I had the right concept. They just decided to throw a curveball.
Yeah. Are you playing Amari Cooper, I guess, this week? Be the one. Would he be the one that would draw Christian Gonzalez? I mean, is that the realistic coverage that you'd assume?
It could be, but that wouldn't scare me. Gonzalez hasn't played as well as he looked before his ACL tear last year. Cooper would win. At this point, here's what I said about the Bills. You play Cook, you play Allen. Everybody else, good luck. Khalil Shakir usually will get his target, so he's kind of in that safe range. Everybody else, you have no idea. Is where you get the 14 target Amari Cooper, or you get the 0 target. Game plan, they could beat you so many ways, and there's nobody they have to go to in any given week. So again, it's Cook, it's Allen, and then probably Shakir, who should be safe.
Yeah, I think Shakir's fine, but I'm not playing Cooper at this point.
No,
I've been burned too often. Let's go to the complete tank bowl. That is the Jags Raiders game. The only reason I'm even mentioning this all together is because Brenton Strange was on the top 5 waiver pickup. The chat was talking about him as a option as well too. Mac Jones is as incapable of a quarterback as there is, which means he will check down, and throw often to Strange. Evan Ingram not done for the season. I think ETN also has some fantasy utility in full point PPR leagues, although that one is not for the weak of heart if you're choosing to go that direction in the fantasy semifinals. So Travis Etienne, Brenton Strange are both those guys that you consider this week if you could.
ETN is a problem because the Raiders have been phenomenal against receiving running backs, and actually running backs in general. They've been, now Bijan took care of them. Again, it's Bijan. It's a different story. They've been good against them. Now, not having Max Crosby, who's a good run defender, is part of that, but not for the receiving part. The Raiders have been great at slowing it down, and ETN's been getting a lot done through the air. So I would be nervous about him. If you've got to start him as a flex, take your chances. They're getting in the ball. Brenton Strange, you're definitely playing. The Raiders are a cake matchup against tight ends. And maybe on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues. If you were in my leagues, I was calling my friends on Friday. As soon as I found that Evan Ingram was done, I go, get Brenton Strange on your team right away, because he had played in weeks 2 through 5 for Ingram, and he was an excellent PPR option. Well, even half PPR, he was an excellent option. And he got interfered with in the end zone in that game. He could have had an even bigger game, but definitely looking at that. Joe, I want to backtrack for a minute. Somebody Angelo brought up a comment about the Bills resting their starters. If you are in a deep league and you need a super crazy flyer, Ray Davis, because if they do blow them out, Ray Davis could see double-digit touches in the second half of that game. If that happens, if you're betting on the Bills blowout, Ray Davis could go off on 12 carries against his defense. But I know we're back to Jaguars.
Well, no, we talked about that on the SiriusXM show yesterday too. Nick had asked that same thing. Bills are favored by 14 points. It's a divisional game. This isn't Ravens Giants. I'll be a little bit. I'm not necessarily ready to take the Bills. The Patriots to at least backdoor cover or whatever that is, but it's a different mindset, different game, and it's not like this team is throwing out some scrubs at quarterback. Like Drake May can do at least a little bit of stuff. So
let me add one thing to that, Joe. Don't forget how much the Bills hate the Patriots, and they remember Tom Brady rubbing it in them, and Josh Allen and his team. They will run up the score on New England. They don't care if Brady's gone. They don't care who else is gone. Belichick's on. They don't care. They hate this team so badly. So if they get a chance to run it up, they are gonna run it up on them.
All right. Well, let's go to the Niners, Dolphins. We've talked about this one a little bit. Is Brock Purdy in the top 10 streaming quarterbacks, or is Tua? I think both those guys could be in that range in certain instances. Of course, Tua probably killed a lot of fantasy playoff teams last week. I don't think it gets much better for him, but I could see Brock Purdy a little bit, although if it's Jalen Ramsey on Juwan Jennings, that makes it pretty tough.
I think George Kittle has a game here. Dolphins have struggled against tight ends. I think that's going to be a catalyst of sorts. Look, Debo isn't getting much left in the tank, but really after a bad touchdown drop last week, even a catch and walk-in touchdown, they'll still get him the ball. I think it was just he put too much pressure on himself. I think he ends up being okay. I think Purdy's going to get you 2 touchdowns in this one. I look, they're in Miami, so weather should not be an issue. So
Right.
we're going to be good there. I think Purdy's going to be fine. Purdy will run for a bit. He's very good at second reaction throws, and the Dolphins will try to scheme up some pressure because they don't get it organically. They got to, manufacture it. And Purdy's good at second reaction throws. But I think Kittle has a game. I think he gets you 80, 90 yards. He might even score you 2 touchdowns in this one.
I don't know if Waddle plays or not, but regardless, I'm not playing Waddle. I mean, Tyreek Hill would be one of those that you'd be trying to bench if you could, but I don't know if you really have many better options or if you've even made to this point with Tyreek Hill on your roster. Isaac Rendo, is he an automatic play for you as like a running back 2 at least?
Yeah, and I definitely think he is because he catches the ball too, and Miami will give up production in the receiving game. But I also think he does get going a bit on the ground here, even if Trent Williams doesn't play. I mean, I think it stinks when he's not in there, but I think realistically, this is a matchup that we can take advantage of, and I do think that Miami has to pay quite a bit of attention to the passing attack. So I think overall, Garendo's a solid start. So yeah, I have him maybe like running back 18-ish, but there's upside. There's upside here.
Hugh in the chat asked Jonathan Taylor or Tyreek Hill.
Jonathan Taylor, the floor is better. The floor is way safer. Look, the 49ers secondary is now healthy. They've got people back. They didn't have a lot of people for a long time. And Nick Bosa's back. And man, Tua, we saw last week. If you get pressure on him, it's a big problem. I would definitely go with Jonathan Taylor's floors, especially the last 2 games. He's got you at least double-digit PPR points. Tyreek Hill right now, he's not having ceiling games. You're not getting those.
Right.
I know he did go off against the Jets. I'll give him that, but you're not really seeing that. It's not the norm for him.
Let's go over to the Buccaneers Cowboys game, which I think is fantasy goodness, but betting wise too. That the Buccaneers are only favored by 4. I'm completely stunned. But the Buccaneers should be at least a touchdown favorite in my mind over this Dallas team. We've had a bunch of questions. So I just want to get to the overarching theme: Bucky Irving or Rashad White against the Cowboys. Let's start there first.
So last week it was Bucky Irving coming back from an injury, and Irving had more snaps than Rashad White in the prior 2 games. That had flipped. Well, with the injury concern, it was back to Rashad White getting a slight edge in snaps. But I think this is kind of where it was. I think Bucky Irving's going to go back to getting a little more work than White. More work around the red zone, more work in the receiving game. He was getting targeted more than Rashad White in recent games. So I think Bucky Irving's in a smash spot here. I think you can start them both, though. I think they both are able to get it done here because remember, this team designs an outstanding screen game, and Dallas is not going to have an answer for that.
Where did White end up in your rankings at running back? Did you have that one set at all, Rashad White?
I'll tell you ask the next question, and I'll tell you after that.
Well, I was just going to say Bucky Irving's going to be a top 15 play, I think, most weeks, but Rashad White would be in that tier of, I think, a little bit higher than Najee Harris. I'll probably play him over Jerome Ford, but that might be it. Like, I'd rather have Rico Dowdle over Rashad White, for example, if we're kind of going apples to apples with those running backs.
Yeah, I've got Rashad White right with Najee Harris around running back 24, and like you said, I got Bucky Irving at 15. But there's an upside tag on him. I always put tags on my players if they have an upside or a downside tag. There's definitely an upside tag because Bucky Irving, there's a world where he goes off in this one.
It's always good to label things. I'm with you. The other one that I've seen often in the chat, and it's different variations, but Joe Mixon, example against the Chiefs, or Rico Dowdle against this Buccaneers team with the over-under being significantly higher.
So Rico Dowdle is dependent on one of 2 things. The Cowboys leading. He gets a ton of carries when they lead. And they've been leading in a few games recently. I don't think they're leading against the Bucs. I think this is a game script that works against them. Yep. And the Bucs are pretty good against the run. They're not dominant like in the old Bucs days, but they're solid against the run. I think those 2 work against Rico Dowdle. Joe Mixon, look, he still got 10 PPR points last week in a total slop game. The Chiefs, their run defense has definitely slid significantly in the last 6 weeks. I think you play Joe Mixon, don't sweat it.
Yeah, that's a no doubter in my mind. I'm playing Joe Mixon as well too. If the Texans have any chance of winning, I think they utilize him quite frequently. And Rico Dowdle, I think, is more of a casualty. What I assume is going to be a game script where Cooper Rush is throwing 55 times. Maybe Dowdle gets involved.
Real quick, Angela, about Dowdle catching. Here's the problem: Todd Bowles sends the blitz all day. If they're in the lead, they're blitzing. Yeah. Rico Dowdle has to pick up the blocks. He's not going to be able to have the luxury of running these little lazy routes. That ain't going to happen.
Real quick, we have somebody in the chat sending a paid question for us. Thank you very much, by the way, Vlogs here. So pick one to start. Of course, Devontae Adams and his record-breaking performance last week. Terry McLaurin, we're talking about against the Eagles. Higgins here in a spot that possibly passing-wise for the Bengals. And then Brian Thompson Jr. That you have only one to pick is tough, Jim, because these are at least three really good options.
Yeah, to me, it comes down between Adams and Higgins. Higgins often gets as many targets as Chase, and Cleveland's excellent against the run. You really can't run on them. So then Chase Brown will get done as a receiver, back to that. But Higgins is going to get his targets. And here's the thing with Cleveland. They blow coverages every week. And I think they lost Martin Emerson last week. I think he's going to be out. They have injuries at corner. So I would say the best blend of floor and ceiling is Higgins. But if you want pure upside, after we saw Devontae Adams doing the second half last week, the Rams don't have a corner to hang with him. Right. So the biggest upside play is Adams, but the best blend of floor and upside is Higgins. So that's what you got to manage. I can't tell you directly which one to start because you've got to decide. I would say like Higgins is in the 15 to 22 point range, where I'd say Adams could be in the as low as 8, but as high as 30. And so you've got to depend on your fantasy matchup which one you need.
And McLaurin, I think, clearly is the fourth of that option, given that matchup against the Eagles. Real quick, we've mentioned already a couple times, Packers and Saints. This one's in Lambeau. Could have some weather involved as too. I think the Packers kind of roll. You talk about Jordan Love, maybe only throwing 18 times. I think Josh Jacobs is going to get a touchdown and then might not play into the third quarter. We mentioned Ray Davis. Is Emmanuel Wilson or even Chris Brooks in that sort of range of, if this blowout scenario happens, a backup running back for the Packers could give some utility too?
Chris Brooks gets more snaps usually. The touches are somewhat close. If I had to go that far, I would probably give Chris Brooks the opportunity. Here's what I'm worried about, Joe. This might be a trap game for the Packers. They're playing Minnesota next week. This is an easy matchup at home against the Saints. The mental part of the game often goes, undersold. And if Alvin Kamara doesn't play, this is another subliminal thing. If he doesn't play with that abductor injury, the Packers might totally look past them, and I'd be very concerned. They could be in a close game because, remember, Saints are still playing hard for Darren Rizzi. They came back against the Commanders and almost won that game.
Yeah, fair by 14. I'll take the Saints to at least cover, but I would be pretty shocked if the Packers end up losing. Kendre Miller, in the event that Kamara is not available, I think also is a play.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's just say Kamara's out. Does he end up going above Najee Harris? I mean, like, where would – okay.
Because he can run and he can catch. Super limited sample size, only like 20 touches, 100th percentile broken tackle rate, 96th percentile yards after that. Again, super small limit. But we saw last year, the numbers weren't, nobody's numbers are that high, but they were very impressive in those two based on what he saw last year. We projected him to be a good player this year. He was hurting in the doghouse. This guy can play football.
I'm with you. I think Kendre Miller is a really good talent. I've liked him since he was a rookie. So that does it for us in the Week 16 edition of the at least previews of these games and also the weekly rankings with Jim. We've had a lot of comments just recently coming in about start-sit stuff. Jim does a show 11 a.m. Eastern on this station, getting you set for all the start-sit stuff leading up into Sunday. Obviously, it's Thursday, Saturday games. So if you have direct questions relating to those games as well, too, at Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter, Jim will be able to help you out as best he can. So Hugh, Rod, guys like that who are asking questions in the chat, please, at Jim Coventry NFL, send the question that way, and Jim will get to it when he can. I know you have another show coming up. I have another show coming up, so I'll let you get going. But thanks again for talking with me, Jim, and we're back in next week.
Take care.
I think, hold on, Jim. Are we back next week?
Yeah, we haven't talked about it yet. It's the holiday week. Oh, I'm on vacation next week. No, we're not. We won't be doing a show next week. We'll be back.
All right.
Yeah, we'll probably be back for week 18. We'll see you in the playoffs.
Yeah, let's go. All right, we'll see you in the playoffs, guys. Thanks, everyone, for listening.